Thank you for the introduction and for inviting me again to come back and give a legal presentation. If you were to miss a presentation, I suppose this may be a good one to miss. So what you may have already gathered, I'm giving a legal status overview for CCS, and doing so, a full global rundown would take much longer than what I have currently. So what I'm going to do is start at the international plane and just highlight a few regulatory changes that's happening, and then focus on the European level, because what we're going to see in our own continent, there's so much happening that is highlighting to our peers said this morning, how do we get to the gigaton level? We need regulatory framework to do so, and a lot is happening to facilitate that deployment. First, very quickly about our firm. We are a Norwegian boutique law firm, and we specialize in CCS and anything to do with CO2. We're 7 people, and we have 2 people abroad as well, based in Norway, but they're sat in Denmark and Australia. So I took this map from the Global CCS Institute to highlight the projects that are happening. This includes CO2 EOR and CCUS projects. And what I want you to take away from this slide is that the projects tend to mirror framework maturity. So where you have early movers in the US, Canada, the EU, and Australia, they have frameworks, and you also see a lot of projects there. That's not always the case. Sometimes you have project before framework, but this tends to be the way it is. And what I want to draw your attention to is you have a new region in. Does this work? Can you see this? No, you can't. Oh, perfect. There are a lot of regulatory developments happening where countries are developing new frameworks. They're looking into how we can make frameworks. So already you see a lot of new dots in Malaysia, Indonesia, Thailand, and these are countries that all have now developed regulatory frameworks. You see Japan as well. I think there's someone from Japan here, they can arrest me on this if I'm wrong, but there was a new CCS bill that was introduced, I think, 2023, end of 2023. But that also showcases that there's a huge new wave of regulatory frameworks already that has come. But there are also a lot of countries that are working to develop frameworks. You've got Qatar, Saudi Arabia, Egypt, South Korea, Timor-Leste, Vietnam, India, the list goes on and on. And what they're doing is, generally, what they're doing is a gap analysis. So they're seeing, okay, we have an existing framework. What they're doing is analyze, okay, petroleum frameworks, mining laws, how can we amend what we already have to include CCS, or do we need a new CCS-specific framework? So a lot of this activity is now being undertaken in a lot of these countries. Also, Brazil, that blue dot is a CO2 ER project, but Brazil is also developing a framework. So a lot is happening. And whilst we're on the international plane, I thought it would be useful to highlight the recent developments under the London Protocol, which is, I'm sure everyone is familiar with the protocols. I'm not going to go into the history of it. I'm just going to bring you up to speed now. As of course, now we got the 2009 amendment and the 2019 resolution, which enables cross-border transportation of CO2. And that is still, as of today, the main international regulatory instruments that addresses offshore storage of CO2. It has no bearing on onshore, just offshore. And in order to transport CO2 across borders on the protocol, you have to have an arrangement or agreement. And now we have 8, and these 6 of them came in 2024, which is very impressive. Norway in April, I think, concluded 4 or 5. So this is absolutely necessary to deploy CCS. So for instance, if we want to import CO2 to Norway now we have a lot more countries that can do that, which will facilitate the commercial aspect. What I think is interesting to point out is that these are, first of all, MOUs, so they're not legally binding. So we have yet to see a binding agreement between countries. What that will look like, don't know. Also, these are arrangements between non-contracting parties. So, contracting parties. So if you're a contracting party and you want to send your CO2 to a non-contracting party, they have a due diligence obligation. Again, what this will look like in practice remains to be seen. Moving from the international plane to the European level. I'm not going to go into detail about the CCS directive, but just pull you through what it is. And that created the legal framework to do CCS in Europe. And that applies to both onshore and offshore storage projects, as long as it exceeds 100 kilotons. And of course, it does require you to store CO2, but if you're going to do it, you have to do it according to the provisions of the CCS directive. As just a fun fact, it was conceived to be in compliance with the protocol, and of course, it has now been transposed in all countries. This map is from the CCUS Sun project, where we're doing is a Horizon Europe funded project. So some of these countries that are highlighted here are included in the study, which is why not all the European countries are in, because only a selected few are in the project. This is just to showcase that even though all countries have now, well, the EEA countries have transposed the directive, it looks different on the ground. And what I mean by that is some countries allow for onshore storage and offshore storage. Some only allow for onshore and or offshore. Some allow for full scale. Some only R&D. And in some countries, it is banned altogether. So just because we have the same CCS directive to begin with, the reality on the ground is different. And this is, yeah, the status in Europe. I thought it was interesting to talk about this. And this is only a selected few because you really see the development that's happening to make the existing frameworks more fit for purpose to enable deployment. Poland, I think, is a very interesting example because they used to only permit storage in the Cambrian Reservoir, which is an offshore area, and associated area within that, and only demonstration projects. Now they're revising the framework to open more areas for storage, which includes also onshore, and they're taking away the exploration license requirement that they used to have, and instead you need a geological works plan to be approved. This is a much simpler exercise for the operators that want to store in Poland. Norway, we're revising the storage regulations. I can't say more about the details because I don't know what they're changing, but I'm assuming that's going to come soon. Latvia, they introduced a new climate law bill, which will replace the law on pollution. And it is the law on pollution that's currently prohibiting storage of CO2. However, when they introduce a new climate law, the ban stays in place until they can do more research on it. Germany is also very interesting, I think. They have an upcoming carbon management strategy and also a new carbon dioxide storage act. Currently, there is a de facto ban. As we know, you can't store in Germany, but now they're revising that as well. So they're looking to opening offshore areas for storage and also looking to enable cross-border transportation under the London Protocol, under the London Protocol as well. And that's quite a big turnaround for Germany. So I think that's an interesting one to watch. France also under revision, and an example here is the duration of the exploration permit. It used to be you get it for 5 years but renewable twice. Now it's lasting for 15 years. And also they have a period of 2 years called the development phase, which is possible before requesting a storage permit. And that is to focus on public acceptance. So that's also quite interesting development. Denmark's developing a regulatory framework for onshore storage. Caution from Gaius is going to present on onshore storage, so maybe he can fill in the blanks a little bit. I'm just keeping it high level due to time constraints. Italy, a new energy decree, and that's just amending the existing CCS decree to make it more fit for purpose and fills regulatory gaps and so on. So that pertains to issuance of permits. And the UK also, New Energy Act 2020 from 2023. That is quite a huge development in the UK and very interesting to see. It establishes the legal framework for the economic regulation of CO2 transport and storage. And the Ofgem is named the Independent Economic Regulator. And again, these are just some examples that I've thought of. There may be more, but this is just to highlight the ongoing developments in Europe. Another thing to draw your attention to is the standardization efforts in Europe. The Commission published their industrial carbon management strategy in February. And within that, they said that they foresee to work with European standardization bodies to establish minimum standards for example, CO2 streams to be used in network codes. And the Commission is also now establishing a working group which will draft a report on the topics regarding CO2 standards to be used, and then they will hand that over to the European standardization bodies, which will make the standards. Also, I think interesting point from the strategy is that from this year, they're going to look into making a future CO2 transport regulatory package that will consider TPA, for instance, and some other topics. And the use of standards is not a new thing. Regulars and project developments have been using, for instance, ISO standards for a long time. So this could be a very useful addition to CCS in Europe. This is the new standardization body that we assume is going to be the body that will be making these standards. They just had their first plenary meeting in this year in 2024, and they will focus more on the EU compared to the ISO TC 265, which doesn't really look into the utilization bit. This is just another slide on the draft scope. I'm not going to go into details, but if you have any questions about standardization, I will put you in contact with my colleague. And that is my cue. Perfect. Acknowledgements, Climate. We participate in the standardization efforts because we get support from Climate to do so. And that is it for me. Thank you very much.